Dr. Eleanor Webb squinted at her laptop screen in the dim light of her campus office at the University of Kentucky. Outside, an October rain tapped against the windows as she scrolled through the digital archives of Harlan County's Historical Society. After 20 years as a genealogist specializing in Appalachian family histories, Eleanor thought she'd seen everything: faded daguerreotypes, water-damaged census records, illegible church registries. But the email from Martin Crowley had piqued her interest in a way nothing had in years. "I found something in my grandmother's attic," Martin had written. "A photograph from 1899. A family reunion on Crowley Hill. There's something wrong with it, with the children in it. I can't explain. You need to see it." Eleanor had almost deleted it as another amateur family historian making mountains of molehills. But Martin Crowley's name carried weight. The Crowleys were coal barons in eastern Kentucky, their fortune built on the backs of miners before unions took hold. If there was a Crowley family archive that had never been studied, it would be a significant find. Her phone buzzed. Martin Crowley. "Dr. Webb, have you considered my request?" "Mr. Crowley, I received your email, but I need more information. What exactly do you think is wrong with the photograph?" A pause stretched between them, filled only by the sound of Martin's breathing. "I'd rather not say over the phone. Please come to Harlan, the Crowley estate. I'll pay whatever your usual consultation fee is. Double it." Eleanor hesitated. End-of-semester grading loomed, and she had promised her daughter, Sarah, a weekend visit. But professional curiosity and the mention of money won out. "I can be there tomorrow afternoon. But Mr. Crowley, I should warn you that most anomalies in historical photographs have simple explanations. Movement during long exposure times, chemical degradation." "It's not that," Martin cut in, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "It's their eyes, and what happened to them all afterward." The line went dead. Eleanor stared at her phone, then turned back to her computer. She pulled up what she knew about the Crowleys: coal wealth, political connections, a reputation for ruthlessness that extended well beyond business dealings. In 1902, 3 years after the supposed reunion photo, the family's main mine collapsed, killing 63 workers. The disaster bankrupted the company, and the Crowleys faded from prominence. She typed Crowley Hill children into the database. Nothing relevant appeared. She tried Crowley family reunion 1899. Again, nothing. Finally, she searched for Crowley Hill deaths, and a newspaper headline from May 1900 appeared. "Tragedy strikes Crowley Hill. 5 children dead of mysterious illness." Eleanor clicked on the article. The scanned newspaper was barely legible, but she could make out the essentials. 5 children from different families had died within weeks of each other. Symptoms included high fever, hallucinations, and self-harm. Doctors had been baffled. All 5 children had attended the Crowley family reunion the previous summer. A chill ran through Eleanor that had nothing to do with the rain outside. She closed her laptop and began packing her research bag. Whatever Martin Crowley had found, it was clearly worth investigating. She'd drive to Harlan County tomorrow, examine the photograph, collect what information she could, and be back for dinner with Sarah on Sunday. As she left her office, Eleanor failed to notice the email that had just arrived in her inbox from an unfamiliar address. "Webb, do not go to Crowley Hill. The children are still there." The message would sit unread until it was too late. Eleanor's car wound through the mist-shrouded mountains of eastern Kentucky. The GPS had lost signal an hour ago, forcing her to rely on Martin Crowley's handwritten directions. "Turn right at the abandoned church, left at the lightning-struck oak." Straight past the old mine entrance. The landscape grew increasingly desolate. Houses appeared less frequently, each more dilapidated than the last. Coal country had never recovered from the industry's decline, and these hills bore the scars of both extraction and abandonment. When the Crowley estate finally came into view, Eleanor almost missed it. What had once been an imposing Victorian mansion now slouched behind overgrown hedges, its grandeur faded like an old photograph. The slate roof sagged in places, and vines crawled up the brick facade. Only the wrought iron gate, recently painted black, suggested anyone still maintained the property. As Eleanor pulled into the circular drive, the front door opened. Martin Crowley stood on the porch, a tall, gaunt man in his 60s with a shock of white hair. He wore a sweater despite the mild October day and clutched a leather portfolio to his chest. "Dr. Webb," he called, hurrying down the steps. "Thank you for coming. Please, come inside quickly." Eleanor grabbed her research bag and followed him into a foyer that smelled of wood polish and something else, something medicinal. "You live here alone, Mr. Crowley?" she asked, taking in the grand staircase and crystal chandelier. "Yes, my wife passed 5 years ago. Cancer." Martin led her into what had once been a formal parlor but now served as a cluttered office. Books and papers covered every surface. "The house has been in the family since 1875. I'm the last Crowley now." "I'm sorry for your loss," Eleanor said automatically, setting her bag on a chair. "You mentioned a photograph?" Martin nodded, carefully placing the leather portfolio on a cleared space on his desk. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. "My grandmother kept this hidden in a locked chest in the attic. I found it after she died in 1989, but I couldn't bring myself to really examine it until recently. She left a note with it." He handed Eleanor a yellowed piece of paper. The handwriting was spidery but legible. "The children must not be remembered. Do not look for them. Do not speak their names. They are gone and should remain so." Eleanor frowned. "What does that mean?" "I don't know, but look at this." Martin carefully removed a large photograph from the portfolio. It was a sepia-toned image, remarkably well preserved, showing about 40 people arranged in 3 rows on the lawn of what was clearly the Crowley estate in its prime. Men in suits and women in high-necked dresses stood stiffly, as was customary for photographs of the era. In the front row sat 7 children. Eleanor leaned closer, her trained eye automatically assessing the photograph's condition and authenticity. It appeared genuine. The clothing, the composition, the printing technique, all consistent with late 19th century photography. "What am I looking for exactly?" she asked. Martin pointed to the children. "Look at their eyes." Eleanor peered at the image. Unlike the adults, whose expressions ranged from solemn to mildly pleasant, all 7 children wore identical blank stares. Their eyes seemed to reflect the camera's flash with an unusual intensity, creating small, bright points of light. "It's just the flash effect," Eleanor said. Early flash photography often created strange reflections, especially in children's eyes because— "It's not that," Martin interrupted. "Count the children." Eleanor counted. 7. "Now look at this." He pulled out another photograph, this one clearly taken moments before or after the first. The adults' positions were slightly different. A hand moved here, a head turned there, but otherwise the composition was identical, except there were only 5 children in the front row. Eleanor blinked, looked back at the first photograph, then at the second again. "That's odd," she admitted. "Maybe 2 children moved between shots." "That's what I thought," Martin said. "So I found this." He produced a third photograph, apparently from the same session. Again, the adults had shifted slightly. There were 9 children in the front row. Eleanor felt a chill creep up her spine. "This could be some kind of double exposure or— Dr. Webb," Martin cut in, his voice low and urgent. "I've had these photographs analyzed by experts. They're genuine, untampered with. And there's more." He pulled out a handwritten list. "These are the names of everyone at that reunion. 28 adults, 5 children." Eleanor stared at the first photograph again. 7 children. The second, 5 children. The third, 9 children. "Who are the extra children?" she whispered. "That's what I need your help to find out," Martin replied, his hands still trembling. "Because every child who appears in these photographs even the ones who shouldn't be there, died within a year of this reunion, and they all died the same way. Eleanor spent the afternoon examining the photographs under Martin's portable microscope, comparing them to the list of attendees and taking detailed notes. The more she looked, the more disturbing the images became. In the first photograph, the 7 children sat perfectly still, their posture unnaturally rigid. In the second photograph, the 5 children, who Martin identified as the actual Crowley descendants present that day, were positioned differently, their poses more natural, their expressions appropriately solemn but childlike. The third photograph was the most unsettling. 9 children stared into the camera, and Eleanor could now see that the 4 extra children were positioned behind the original 5, almost seeming to emerge from the shadows between the adults' legs. "These can't all be authentic," Eleanor insisted. Though her professional certainty was wavering, early photography required long exposure times. Children rarely sat perfectly still. Multiple exposures would explain. "The photographer used the latest equipment," Martin said. "Imported from New York, instantaneous exposure, and look at the adults. They're identical in position in all 3 photos. Only the children change." Eleanor rubbed her eyes. The October afternoon had faded into evening, and Martin had lit several oil lamps, claiming the house's electrical wiring was unreliable. The dancing flames cast shifting shadows across the photographs. "Tell me about the deaths," she said finally. Martin pulled out a folder of newspaper clippings, death certificates, and personal letters. The first was Timothy Winters, age 8. Found in the creek behind his house in November 1899. "Drowned," they said, but his mother's letter to my great-grandfather mentions strange marks on his arms and face. He placed a small obituary on the table. The boy's solemn face stared out from a grainy photograph. Eleanor recognized him from the reunion photos. Then Eliza Cunningham in January 1900. Fever and hallucinations. She clawed at her own eyes before the end, claiming they were watching her from inside. Martin continued methodically through each death. 7 children in total, all under the age of 12, all dead within 8 months of the reunion. The official causes varied: drowning, fever, a fall, an accident with farm equipment. But Martin's collected correspondence revealed disturbing similarities. Hallucinations, self-harm, and reports of children talking about the others or the watching children. "What about the adults in the photograph?" Eleanor asked, her mouth dry. "Most lived normal lives," Martin said, "but 5 of them committed suicide within 10 years, including my great-grandmother's brother, who was the host of the reunion. He hanged himself in the attic. Left a note saying only, 'They're in the walls now.'" Eleanor shivered despite herself. The rational part of her mind, the trained academic, insisted there must be a logical explanation. Perhaps a contagious illness that caused neurological symptoms had spread among the children at the reunion. Perhaps the suicides were unrelated, merely a statistical cluster in an era when mental health was poorly understood. But as the lamplight flickered across the photographs, making the children's eyes seem to blink and shift, another part of her mind whispered that some mysteries defied rational explanation. "Mr. Crowley," she said carefully, "why did you wait so long to investigate this? You said you found these photographs in 1989. Martin's face tightened. "I didn't wait. I started researching immediately, but everyone I contacted, historians, photographers, paranormal researchers, they either dismissed me or—" He swallowed hard. "Things happened to them, accidents, sudden illnesses. One woman, a psychic from Louisville, killed herself the day after handling these photographs. Cut her wrists and wrote, 'The children are counting on her bathroom mirror.'" Eleanor felt a surge of anger. "You should have told me this before I came here." "Would you have believed me?" Martin asked simply. "Would you have come?" Before she could answer, a loud crash came from upstairs. Martin jumped to his feet. "There's no one else here," he whispered. "I checked every room before you arrived." Another crash, followed by the sound of running footsteps, light, quick steps like those of a child. Martin grabbed a fireplace poker. "Stay here." "Absolutely not," Eleanor said, pulling out her phone. No signal, of course. Together they moved into the foyer and looked up the grand staircase. The upper floor was dark, except for a sliver of light coming from beneath a door at the end of the hallway, a door that Martin swore had been closed when he checked the house earlier. As they watched, a shadow moved across the light. A small shadow. "Hello?" Martin called, his voice cracking. "Who's there?" The only answer was a child's laugh, high and musical, followed by more running footsteps and another door slamming. "We need to leave," Eleanor said, backing toward the front door. "Now!" But Martin was already climbing the stairs, poker raised. "I need to know. I need to end this." Eleanor hesitated, then followed him up the creaking staircase. Professional curiosity warred with primal fear as they reached the top landing and moved toward the lighted room. Martin pushed the door open with the poker. It was a child's bedroom, perfectly preserved from another era. A four-poster bed with a handmade quilt. Wooden toys on shelves, a rocking horse in the corner, swaying gently as if recently disturbed. And on the bed, arranged in a neat row, were 9 daguerreotypes in tarnished silver frames. Each showed the face of a child, the same children from the reunion photographs. The frames were coated with a fine layer of dust, except for small, clear fingerprints pressed into the silver, fresh fingerprints. "They're awake now," Martin whispered. "God help us, they're awake." Eleanor approached the daguerreotypes cautiously, her academic training momentarily overriding her fear. Each silver frame contained the portrait of a child, formally posed as was typical for the expensive photographic process in the late 19th century. 7 boys, 2 girls, all staring with the same unsettling blank expression she'd seen in the reunion photographs. "Do you recognize them?" she asked Martin, who remained frozen in the doorway. "The 5 Crowley children are there," he said. "The others, I don't know who they are. They're not on any family record." Eleanor examined the back of one frame. A name was inscribed in flowing script. "Thomas Crowley, 1897. She checked another. "Margaret Winters, 1895. "Winters," she said. "Like Timothy Winters, the boy who drowned." Martin nodded. "His sister. She died of diphtheria 2 years before the reunion." A chill ran through Eleanor. "And the others, the ones who aren't Crowleys, all dead before 1899, Martin whispered. "Children from neighboring families, all buried in the small cemetery behind the Crowley chapel." Eleanor carefully set down the daguerreotype she was holding. "Mr. Crowley, these photographs, they couldn't have been at the reunion. These children were already dead." "Yes," Martin said simply, "but they appear in the reunion photograph anyway, more in some versions than others." The rocking horse in the corner suddenly moved, creaking back and forth with increasing speed, though no one was near it. The temperature in the room plummeted, their breath now visible in the cold air. Eleanor backed toward Martin. "We need to leave, now." But as they turned to go, the door slammed shut. The oil lamp on the bedside table flickered wildly, casting grotesque, elongated shadows across the walls, shadows that moved independently of any visible source. Martin lunged for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. "It's stuck!" Eleanor grabbed her phone again, still no signal, and turned on the flashlight function. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on the daguerreotypes. The children in the silver frames were gone. In their place were empty backgrounds, the painted studio scenery still visible, but the subjects vanished. A soft giggle came from behind them, then another from the closet, a third from under the bed. "They're here," Martin gasped, still wrestling with the door. "God help us, they're here with us." Eleanor swung her phone's light around the room. For a brief second she thought she saw a small figure dart across the far wall, not a shadow but a child, moving with impossible speed. "What do they want?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "To be remembered," Martin said. "My grandmother's note got it wrong. They don't want to be forgotten. They're angry because they were erased. The Crowley family tried to write them out of history. The rocking horse crashed onto its side. A wooden toy soldier flew across the room, narrowly missing Eleanor's head. The daguerreotypes began to rattle in their frames. "Why?" Eleanor pressed, ducking as another toy sailed past. "The mine," Martin said, his voice breaking. "They knew the mine was unsafe. My great-grandfather knew. The support timbers were rotting. Too expensive to replace. When it collapsed in 1902, 63 men died, including the fathers of these children." But the reunion was in 1899, Eleanor objected, "before the collapse." "Yes," Martin whispered, 3 years before, but these children died after the reunion and before the collapse, all of them, and they knew it was coming. Somehow, they knew. A child's voice, clear as a bell, spoke from the shadows in the corner. "We tried to warn them." Another voice from near the ceiling. "They wouldn't listen." A third, directly behind Eleanor. "So we showed them." Eleanor whirled around, her phone's light illuminating nothing but empty air. Yet she felt certain something had just whispered in her ear, its breath cold against her skin. Martin had stopped struggling with the door and stood with his back against it, face ashen. "The children," he said hoarsely. "The ones who died after the reunion. They weren't killed by any illness. They were possessed by these others, the dead children. They were trying to force the living to speak through them, to warn about the mine." The lamp exploded suddenly, plunging the room into darkness, except for Eleanor's phone light. In the new shadows, she could see them more clearly. Flitting shapes of children moving with jerky, unnatural motions. Not quite solid, not quite transparent. "And now?" Eleanor asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "What do they want now?" "Justice," came a chorus of small voices from every corner of the room. "Remember us. Tell our story. Make them pay." Martin slid down the door until he was sitting on the floor. "The Crowley fortune," he said dully. "What's left of it? It came from death. The company paid the bare minimum to the widows after the collapse, then declared bankruptcy to avoid further liability. My family rebuilt their wealth from the insurance payout on the mine." One of the daguerreotypes flew off the bed and shattered against the wall. Then another, and another. With each breaking frame, a new child shape materialized in the room, more solid than before. Their eyes reflected Eleanor's phone light like the eyes in the reunion photographs. Too bright, too knowing. "Mr. Crowley," Eleanor said urgently, "I think you need to promise them something now." Martin nodded shakily. "I'll do it," he called out. "I'll tell the world what happened. I'll make it right. The money, I'll give it all to the descendants of the miners. Please, just let us go." The temperature dropped further. Frost began to form on the windows. "Promises," said a girl's voice, dripping with scorn. "Your family made promises before." "I mean it," Martin insisted. "Doctor, Webb is a historian. She'll help me document everything. We'll publish the truth." Eleanor felt tiny, ice-cold fingers brush against her hand. She flinched, but didn't pull away. "Swear it," whispered a boy's voice directly in front of her. "Blood oath." Martin fumbled in his pocket and produced a small pocket knife. Without hesitation, he drew the blade across his palm. Blood welled up, black in the dim light. "I swear on my blood," he said, "the Crowley debt will be paid." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the child shapes gathered around Martin. Each placed a spectral hand in his blood. The door behind Martin suddenly swung open, causing him to fall backward into the hallway. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She bolted after him, helping him to his feet, and together they stumbled down the stairs and out of the house into the cool night air. Behind them, children's laughter echoed from every window of the Crowley estate, and in the highest window, 9 small figures stood watching as Eleanor and Martin fled to her car. Eleanor's hands shook as she tried to start her car. The engine sputtered once, twice, before finally roaring to life. Martin climbed into the passenger seat, clutching his bleeding hand. "Drive," he gasped. "Just drive." Eleanor reversed down the gravel driveway, her headlights sweeping across the front of the Crowley estate. For a brief moment, she thought she saw small faces pressed against every window, watching their departure. Then the house disappeared around a bend in the road. They drove in silence for several minutes, the only sound Martin's ragged breathing. Finally, Eleanor pulled over at a scenic overlook. The lights of a small town, Harlan proper, she assumed, twinkled in the valley below. "We need to talk about what just happened," she said, turning to face Martin. "They were real," he whispered, staring at his cut palm. "All these years I told myself it was just a family legend, a strange coincidence. But they were real." Eleanor took a deep breath. The rational part of her mind was already constructing alternative explanations. A hallucination brought on by suggestion and the power of Martin's belief. Carbon monoxide poisoning from the old house's heating system, an elaborate hoax. But none of these explanations satisfied her. She had seen the children, heard them, felt their cold touch. "The mind collapsed," she said. "You said the dead children somehow knew it was coming? How is that possible?" Martin wiped his bloody hand on his handkerchief. "There were rumors, even then. Miners complained about the conditions. Inspections were falsified. My great-grandfather bribed officials." He laughed bitterly. "The Crowley fortune wasn't built on coal. It was built on corruption. And the children who died after the reunion? I think—" Martin hesitated. "I think the dead children, the ones who had already lost their fathers to mining accidents or disease, somehow saw what was coming. Maybe they were trying to warn everyone through the living children." Eleanor remembered the newspaper article she'd found about the mysterious deaths. But instead of delivering the warning, the living children fell ill, self-harmed, died. "Their bodies couldn't contain what was trying to come through," Martin said softly. "Or maybe my family silenced them somehow. There are gaps in the family records from that period, letters and journals that should exist but don't." They sat in silence for a moment, the car's heater fighting against the October chill. "What will you do now?" Eleanor finally asked. "What I promised," Martin said, his voice stronger. "The Crowley Foundation still has millions, money made from death. I'll find the descendants of those miners and make restitution, and I'll tell the story, our real story." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I'll help document it, academically, but Martin, the other part, what we saw tonight, I don't know if I can include that in any official record." "You don't have to," Martin said. "The historical facts are damning enough. The falsified inspections, the ignored warnings, the deaths that could have been prevented." He looked down at his hand again. "But I need to go back to the house." "What?" Eleanor stared at him. "After what just happened. Those children have been waiting for justice for over 100 years, Martin said. "I won't make them wait any longer. There are records in that house, hidden records. My grandmother showed me once where they were kept, though I was too young to understand their significance." "It's too dangerous," Eleanor protested. "They won't hurt me now," Martin said with strange certainty. "I've made the oath. They'll hold me to it, but they won't stop me from fulfilling it." Eleanor wanted to argue further, but something in Martin's expression stopped her. A resolve that hadn't been there before. Perhaps even a kind of peace. "Take me back to my motel," she said finally. "I need time to process all this. We can meet tomorrow and make a plan." "Of course," Martin agreed. "You've seen enough for one night." As Eleanor put the car in drive, her phone buzzed. Signal had returned, and with it a flood of notifications. Most were inconsequential, emails from students, a weather alert for rain tomorrow. But one made her blood freeze, an email that had arrived yesterday just after she'd left her office. "Webb, do not go to Crowley Hill. The children are still there." She opened it with trembling fingers. The message contained only one additional line. "They've been watching you too. Check your family photographs." "What is it?" Martin asked, noticing her expression. Eleanor couldn't speak. She pulled up her photo gallery and found a recent picture of her daughter Sarah's birthday party. 6 children gathered around a cake. She had only invited 5 children. The 6th, a solemn-faced boy standing slightly behind the others, was no one she recognized. His eyes reflected the camera flash with an unnatural brightness. "Take me to my daughter," she whispered. "Now." Eleanor burst through the door of her ex-husband's house in Lexington just after midnight, ignoring his startled protests as she rushed past him to Sarah's bedroom. "Elle, what the hell?" David called after her. "Sarah's asleep." Eleanor didn't respond. She had driven nearly 2 hours from Harlan, her mind racing with terrible possibilities, Martin Crowley following in his own car after she'd refused to let him out at his estate. She flung open Sarah's bedroom door. The nightlight cast a soft glow over her daughter's sleeping form. Eleanor stood in the doorway counting her daughter's breaths, assuring herself that Sarah was safe, normal, alive. "Mom?" Sarah murmured, stirring at the sudden light from the hallway. "What's wrong?" Eleanor rushed to the bed, gathering her daughter in a fierce hug. "Nothing, sweetheart. I just missed you." David appeared in the doorway, his initial anger giving way to concern. "Eleanor, it's midnight. What's going on?" "I need to see all the recent photos you've taken of Sarah," Eleanor said, her voice low but urgent. "On your phone, now." "What? Why?" "Please, David, it's important." Something in her tone must have convinced him. He retrieved his phone from the bedside table in the master bedroom and handed it to her, watching with bewilderment as she scrolled frantically through his photo gallery. School drop-off, soccer practice, a trip to the ice cream shop. Dozens of everyday moments featuring Sarah, alone, with David, with friends. Eleanor examined each one carefully, her heart pounding. No extra children, no strange reflections, no unexplained figures in the background. The relief was so overwhelming that Eleanor sank onto Sarah's bed, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "Mom, you're scaring me," Sarah said, now fully awake. "I'm sorry, baby. Everything's fine." Eleanor smoothed her daughter's hair. I had a bad dream about you and needed to make sure you were okay." "At midnight?" David asked skeptically. "I was in Harlan for work. It's a long drive." Eleanor handed back David's phone. "I'm sorry for barging in. I wasn't thinking clearly." David's expression softened slightly. He'd been married to Eleanor long enough to recognize her genuine distress. "Why don't you stay here tonight? The guest room's made up." Eleanor nodded gratefully. "Thank you." After tucking Sarah back in and promising to make pancakes in the morning, Eleanor followed David into the hallway. "Want to tell me what's really going on?" he asked quietly. Eleanor hesitated. How could she possibly explain what she'd experienced tonight? David was the most rational person she knew, a chemical engineer who believed in data and evidence. He'd never accept a story about ghostly children and cursed photographs. "I'm working on a disturbing historical case," she said finally. "A family with a history of child deaths. I think it affected me more than I realized." David studied her face. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Elle." She laughed shakily. "Something like that." A soft knock at the front door interrupted them. David frowned. "Who the hell is that at this hour?" "It's Martin Crowley," Eleanor said. "The client I'm working with. He followed me here to make sure I got back safely." David's frown deepened. "I'll handle this." "No, it's okay. He's harmless." Eleanor went to the door and opened it to find Martin standing on the porch, his cut hand now properly bandaged, his face haggard in the porch light. "Is your daughter safe?" he asked without preamble. "Yes," Eleanor replied. "No sign of anything unusual." Martin's shoulders sagged with relief. "Good. That's good." David appeared behind Eleanor. "Mr. Crowley, I presume. It's very late." "I apologize for the intrusion," Martin said. "I just wanted to ensure Dr. Webb arrived safely." "She did, as you can see," David said coolly. "Thank you for your concern." "I should go," Martin said. "Dr. Webb, I'll call you tomorrow to discuss our project further." As he turned to leave, Eleanor noticed something clutched in his uninjured hand, a small silver frame, tarnished with age. "Martin," she called, "Well, what's that?" He looked down at the frame, as if surprised to find it in his hand. "One of the daguerreotypes, from the bedroom. I found it in my car after you left." He held it up. The frame was empty, No photograph inside, just a blank backing. "The child is gone," Martin said softly. "They're all gone from their frames now." David looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "What are you two talking about?" Eleanor took the empty frame from Martin, turning it over in her hands. The name on the back read, "Margaret Winters, 1895. "Where do you think they've gone?" she asked Martin. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I intend to find out. I've made a promise to keep." Eleanor handed the frame back. "Be careful, Martin. Whatever's happening here, it's bigger than either of us understood." Martin nodded gravely. "Get some rest, Dr. Webb. Your daughter is safe for now. But I wouldn't leave Lexington if I were you, not until we understand what's happening." As Martin walked back to his car, David closed the door and turned to Eleanor with exasperation. "Okay, that's it. What the hell is going on? What project are you working on that has you both acting like characters in a Gothic novel?" Eleanor sighed. She owed David some explanation. They might be divorced, but they were still co-parents, still friends, in their own complicated way. "Let me show you something," she said, pulling out her phone and finding the photo from Sarah's birthday party. "How many children do you see in this picture?" David squinted at the screen. "5. The kids from her class that you invited." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. "Look again, behind Tommy Peterson." David looked more carefully, then shrugged. "There's nobody behind Tommy." Eleanor stared at the photo. The 6th child, the solemn-faced boy with the reflecting eyes, was gone. Eleanor barely slept that night, her mind racing with questions she had no answers for. By morning, the events at the Crowley estate had taken on a dreamlike quality, and she might have convinced herself it had all been some strange hallucination, if not for the email still in her inbox and the memory of the photograph that had shown her a child only she could see. Over breakfast, she watched Sarah carefully for any signs of change or distress, but her 8-year-old daughter seemed perfectly normal, chattering about school and soccer practice while devouring the promised pancakes. "Can I go to Emma's house today?" Sarah asked, maple syrup dripping down her chin. Eleanor hesitated. The thought of letting Sarah out of her sight made her stomach clench with anxiety, but the rational part of her mind, the part that was desperately trying to regain control, argued that there was no evidence of any threat to her daughter. The strange boy in the photograph was gone. Whatever connection the Crowley children had tried to establish appeared to be broken. "Sure, honey," she said finally, "but I'll drop you off and pick you up myself, okay?" "Dad usually takes me," Sarah pointed out. David, who had been quietly observing Eleanor all morning, cleared his throat. "Your mom and I need to talk about some work stuff today, adult boring stuff, so she'll drive you." Sarah rolled her eyes, in the way only children can when adults are being obvious. "Fine." Dun, after Sarah was safely delivered to her friend's house, Eleanor and David sat in his living room, coffee mugs in hand, an uncomfortable silence between them. "Are you going to tell me what's really going on?" David finally asked. "And don't give me that line about a disturbing historical case. I know you, Elle. You've studied massacres and epidemics without batting an eye. This is something else." Eleanor stared into her coffee. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me." She took a deep breath and told him everything. The photographs that showed different numbers of children, the newspaper accounts of mysterious deaths, the encounter at the Crowley estate with the empty daguerreotypes and the ghostly children, and finally, the photograph of Sarah's birthday party with the extra child that only she could see. David listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern. "You're right," he said when she finished. "I don't believe in ghosts or supernatural photographs, but I believe that you believe what you saw." He reached across the coffee table and took her hand. "Have you considered that this Crowley man might be manipulating you somehow, creating elaborate tricks to convince you of this story?" "For what purpose?" Eleanor asked. "You said he wants to give away his family fortune as restitution. Maybe he needs a credible academic to validate his story, to make it seem less like the ravings of a guilty conscience." Eleanor considered this. It was a plausible explanation, far more plausible than vengeful child spirits. But it didn't account for everything. What about the email warning me not to go to Crowley Hill? Martin couldn't have sent that. He wanted me to come. Anyone with knowledge of your research could have sent it, David pointed out. A colleague, a student, or it could be a coincidence, someone warning you about an unsafe location. Eleanor's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. Martin Crowley. I should take this, she said, stepping onto the back porch for privacy. Dr. Webb, Martin's voice sounded strained. I've found something. In the attic. Records my great-grandfather kept about the mine inspections, and something else. A journal belonging to the mining company's doctor. He was treating the children who died after the reunion. What does it say? Eleanor asked. Her academic interest piqued, despite her lingering fear. The symptoms he described, the fevers, the self-harm, the hallucinations, he believed they were suffering from ergot poisoning. Eleanor frowned. Ergot? The fungus that grows on rye? Yes. Apparently there was bread served at the reunion that came from a local mill. The doctor suspected contaminated flour. But here's the strange part. Only the children who ate it became ill, none of the adults. That actually makes sense, Eleanor said slowly. Ergot poisoning can cause powerful hallucinations. It's been linked to historical cases of mass hysteria, even witch trials. The children might have been more susceptible due to their smaller body mass. Exactly, Martin said. But the doctor's requests for an investigation were denied by my great-grandfather, and there's more. The doctor began to experience symptoms himself after treating the children. Hallucinations, visions of dead children warning about the mine. Eleanor felt a chill despite the warm October sun. So he was exposed to ergot too. That's what he thought at first. But he writes that he was careful not to eat anything from the patients' homes. He came to believe it was something else, something contagious. Not a disease, but the visions themselves. As if once you saw the dead children, they could see you too. The chill deepened. Eleanor remembered the solemn-faced boy in Sarah's birthday photo, the boy only she could see. Martin, I need to ask you something. The children in those daguerreotypes, what did they look like? Specifically, was there a boy about 8 years old, dark hair, very pale? A pause. Yes. Edward Simmons, son of a foreman who died in a miner collapse in 1897. Why? Eleanor closed her eyes. I think I saw him in a photograph of my daughter. Christ, Martin breathed. Then it's happening again. They're reaching out through you now. But why me? Why my daughter? Because you've seen them, Martin said simply. You've acknowledged them, and now they want something from you too. Eleanor thought of Sarah, laughing with her friend Emma, blissfully unaware of ancient tragedies and vengeful spirits. I won't let them near my daughter. I don't think you can stop them, Martin said. Not unless you help them get what they want. And what is that? Justice, Martin replied. The same thing they've always wanted. I'm going through the company records now. There were 63 miners killed in the 1902 collapse. I'm compiling their names, trying to trace their descendants. That could take months, Eleanor protested. We don't have months, Martin said grimly. The children are restless. They've waited long enough. Eleanor thought quickly. I have access to genealogical databases through the university. Send me the names. I can help track the families. Thank you, Martin said, relief evident in his voice. And Dr. Webb, be careful. The doctor's journal ends abruptly in April 1900. The last entry mentions children in the walls watching. He was found hanging in his office the next day. After hanging up, Eleanor stood on the porch for a long moment, trying to reconcile the academic historian with the terrified mother. If ergot poisoning explained the original children's deaths, perhaps everything else, the apparitions, the moving photographs, could be explained by suggestion and coincidence. But the boy in Sarah's photograph, that had been real. She had seen him. David opened the porch door. Everything okay? Eleanor turned to him, decision made. I need to go back to my office at the university. There's research I need to do, urgent research. Can Sarah stay with you for a few days? David studied her face. This is about those Crowley children, isn't it? Yes, Eleanor admitted, and I need to finish it before... She couldn't complete the sentence. David sighed. I still think this Crowley guy is manipulating you. But I know that look. You're not going to let this go until you've solved it. So yes, Sarah can stay with me. On one condition. What's that? I'm coming with you to your office. I want to see these photographs for myself. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but... David, if you see anything unusual, anything at all, promise you'll tell me immediately. Define unusual, he said, with a faint smile. Children who shouldn't be there, Eleanor replied, not smiling back. Children with eyes that reflect light too brightly. The university campus was quiet for a Saturday, with only a few students lounging on the autumn-painted lawn. Eleanor led David to her office in the history department, unlocking the door with hands that trembled slightly. I've got the digital scans Martin sent me on my computer, she explained, booting up her desktop. And I need to access the genealogical databases. David leaned against her desk, arms crossed. Despite his skepticism, he'd agreed to help, recognizing the genuine fear in his ex-wife's eyes. Whatever was happening, delusion, manipulation, or something truly inexplicable, Eleanor believed Sarah was in danger. Here, Eleanor said, turning the monitor so David could see. These are the 3 reunion photographs. Look at the front row. David leaned closer, studying the sepia-toned images. Different children in each one, he observed, or different positions at least. Count them, Eleanor instructed. 7 in this one, 5 in this one, 9 in the last. David straightened. Taken in sequence? Supposedly within moments of each other, Eleanor confirmed, with a camera that used instantaneous exposure. No time for children to run in and out of the frame. David frowned. Could be doctored. Even in 1899, photographers could manipulate images, double exposures, composite prints. That's what I thought too, Eleanor said. But look at the adults. Their positions are nearly identical in all 3. Only the children change. David rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Partial manipulation, then. Someone altered just the children in the photographs. But why? Eleanor pressed. And how do you explain what Martin and I saw at the estate? The empty daguerreotypes, the children's voices. Suggestion is powerful, David said gently. You went there expecting to find something supernatural, primed by Martin's stories and these strange photographs. As for the empty frames that could easily be staged, Eleanor sighed. David's rational explanations should have been comforting, but they felt hollow in the face of what she'd experienced. What about the boy in Sarah's birthday photo? She asked. The one only I could see? Show me again, David requested. Eleanor pulled up the photo on her phone. To her, it still showed only the 5 invited children. No sign of the solemn-faced boy who had been standing behind Tommy Peterson. What did he look like, this boy you saw? David asked. Dark hair, pale skin, serious expression, old-fashioned clothing, not a costume, but like he'd stepped out of a different era. And his eyes, Eleanor shuddered. They reflected the camera flash in an unnatural way. David was silent for a moment, studying the photograph. Elle, he said finally, have you been sleeping well lately? Eating properly? Eleanor bristled. You think I'm hallucinating? I think you're overworked and possibly being manipulated by a man with a guilty conscience and a flair for the theatrical, David said carefully. I think you saw these disturbing historical photographs and your mind started playing tricks on you. Before Eleanor could respond, her office phone rang, an unusual occurrence on a Saturday. She answered with a cautious, Hello, Dr. Webb. It was Lisa Chen, one of her graduate students. I'm sorry to bother you on the weekend, But something weird is happening with the archival photographs we've been digitizing for the Appalachian mining project. Eleanor's grip tightened on the receiver. What kind of weird? The metadata is corrupted somehow. All the files are showing the wrong dates, and some of the images, they've changed. Changed how? Eleanor asked, though she already suspected the answer. People who weren't in the originals are showing up in the digital scans, Lisa said. Specifically, children. We thought it was a glitch at first, but it's only affecting photographs from certain mining communities in eastern Kentucky, all from around 1899 to 1902. Eleanor caught David's eye. "I'll be right there," she told Lisa. "Don't do anything with those files until I arrive." After hanging up, she quickly explained the situation to David. "Still think it's all in my head?" she challenged. David's skepticism had faltered slightly. "Could be a computer virus. Or maybe your student is in on whatever game Crowley is playing." "Lisa doesn't even know about the Crowley case," Eleanor countered, gathering her things. "Come on, the digital archives are in the basement of the library." 20 minutes later, they stood in the university's climate-controlled digital archiving room, staring at Lisa's computer screen. The graduate student had pulled up several photographs from the Appalachian mining project, a massive undertaking to preserve historical records from Kentucky's coal mining communities. "See?" Lisa pointed to a group photograph of miners standing outside a colliery. "This is how it looked when we first scanned it last month." The original showed about 30 men in work clothes, faces blackened with coal dust, expressions solemn. "And this is the file now." The same photograph, but with a difference. 5 children stood among the miners, their clean faces and formal clothing in stark contrast to the grimy workers surrounding them. "We didn't notice at first," Lisa continued, "but then Dr. Patel was reviewing the metadata and found the discrepancies. When we compared the current files to our backup from last month, we discovered the changes." Eleanor leaned closer. The children's eyes in the manipulated photograph had the same unnatural brightness she'd seen in the Crowley reunion photos. "Has anyone else accessed these files?" she asked. Lisa shook her head. "Only project team members, and the system logs don't show any unauthorized access." "Show me more," Eleanor requested. Lisa clicked through several more photographs, all mining-related, all now showing children who hadn't been there in the original scans. Children standing among workers, children peering from mine entrances, children sitting on coal carts. "It gets weirder," Lisa said, pulling up another image. "This is a photograph of the Harlan County Mining Company Board of Directors, 1901. Oh, the formal portrait showed 7 men in expensive suits seated around a polished table. Standing behind them were 9 children, their expressions accusatory, their eyes bright with reflected light. One of the men is Julian Crowley," Lisa noted. "He owned the company." Eleanor felt her heart race. "Martin's great-grandfather. The photograph was donated to our archives by the Harlan Historical Society," Lisa continued, "but they have no record of these children in their original. It's like they've been inserted somehow." David, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "Could it be a prank? Someone hacking into the system?" Lisa shrugged. "The cybersecurity team is looking into it, but they haven't found anything yet, and it's only affecting these specific photographs. Nothing else in the archive has been touched." Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from Martin. "Found all 63 names. Working on descendants now. Something else in the records. Company doctor suspected children were deliberately poisoned to silence them. They knew about the mine conditions. Have you seen anything unusual?" Eleanor quickly typed back, "Children appearing in mining photographs in university archives. Same bright eyes. Coming to you now." "I need to go," she told David and Lisa. "David, can you stay here and help Lisa check if any other photographs have been affected? Focus on anything related to the Harlan County Mining Company between 1899 and 1902. David caught her arm. "You're going back to Crowley's place, aren't you?" "I have to," Eleanor said. This is bigger than just his family. These children, whatever they are, they're trying to tell us something about all the mining operations from that period. Then I'm coming with you, David insisted. No, Eleanor said firmly. I need you here, protecting Sarah and helping Lisa. You're right, this could all be an elaborate hoax. If it is, you'll find the evidence here. David hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Call me every hour. If you don't, I'm coming after you with the police. Deal, Eleanor agreed, already heading for the door. Behind her, Lisa called out, Dr. Webb! There's one more thing you should see. Eleanor turned back. Lisa had pulled up one final photograph on her screen, a school portrait of a class of children from 1901. Among the 30 or so students, 5 faces had been circled in red. These are the children who died after the Crowley reunion, Lisa explained. I cross-referenced the names from the newspaper articles. But look at their eyes in this photograph. Eleanor looked. Unlike the other students whose eyes appeared normal, these 5 children had the same unnatural brightness she'd come to recognize, and behind each of them, barely visible like a double exposure, stood another child. Children who matched the descriptions of those who had died before the reunion. How did you know to look for this? Eleanor asked, her mouth dry. Lisa looked uncomfortable. I've been having dreams about children asking for help. I thought it was just stress from the project, but they told me to look for their pictures, to show you. A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. When did these dreams start? Last week, Lisa said, right after we scanned the Crowley Mining Company records. Eleanor met David's eyes, seeing his skepticism finally giving way to uncertainty. Be careful, he said softly. Whatever's happening here, I will, Eleanor promised. Watch over Sarah. She turned to Lisa. And Lisa, if you see any children who shouldn't be there, in photographs, in dreams, anywhere, tell David immediately. As Eleanor hurried from the library toward her car, she failed to notice the small figures watching from the upper windows of the History Department building. 7 children, their pale faces solemn, their eyes unnaturally bright, even in the afternoon sunlight. They had found more witnesses, more voices to tell their story. Soon everyone would remember. The drive back to Harlan County seemed to take forever, though Eleanor's speedometer rarely dipped below 80. Her mind raced faster than her car, connecting fragments of information into a pattern that grew more disturbing with each mile. The children who died after the Crowley reunion had been poisoned, not accidentally with ergot, but deliberately, because they knew something about the mine, something that threatened the Crowley fortune. But how had they known? The mine collapse wouldn't happen until 1902, years after the reunion. Unless they had been warned by the children who had already died. Children whose fathers had perished in previous mining accidents. Children who somehow knew the same negligence would lead to a much larger disaster. And now those children, both the dead and those who had been silenced, were reaching out again, not just through the Crowley photographs, but through any images connected to the mines. They were making themselves visible, demanding to be remembered. Eleanor's phone rang. David. Lisa found more, he said without preamble. It's spreading, Elle. Children are appearing in photographs all over the archives, not just mining images now, but any photographs from eastern Kentucky during that period. School portraits, family gatherings, church picnics, all showing the same children? Eleanor asked. No, different children in different photographs, but all with the same brightness in their eyes. Lisa's identified 23 distinct children so far, and some of them match the descriptions of children who died in other mining accidents across Kentucky, not just the Crowley mine. Eleanor gripped the steering wheel tighter. It was industry-wide, she whispered. The negligence, the cover-ups, the Crowleys weren't the only ones. There's something else, David continued, his voice strained. Lisa went to get coffee and left her computer unlocked. When she came back, someone had opened a new document and typed a message. What did it say? Tell Dr. Webb we're waiting at Crowley Hill. All of us now. Eleanor's blood ran cold. No one else was in the room. "No one living," David said, and Eleanor realized with a shock that her rational, skeptical ex-husband was now speaking as if he believed. "David, listen to me," she said urgently. "Take Sarah and go to your parents' house in Cincinnati. Now, don't tell anyone where you're going." "What about you?" "I'm almost at the Crowley estate. I need to finish this." "Elle, this is insane." "You can't face this alone. Let me call the police." "And tell them what?" Eleanor demanded. "That ghost children are appearing in photographs? They'll think we're all crazy." "No, I need to help Martin complete his research. Find the descendants. Make restitution." "At least let me come to you," David pleaded. "No, stay with Sarah. Keep her safe." Eleanor paused, then added softly, "I love you both." She hung up before David could argue further. As the Crowley estate came into view, Eleanor was struck by how different it looked in daylight. Less Gothic, more decrepit. The grand Victorian architecture couldn't hide the peeling paint, the sagging porch, the general air of decay. Martin met her at the door, his face haggard, his clothes rumpled as if he'd been wearing them for days instead of hours. "I've been working non-stop," he said, leading her to his study. "I've identified 47 descendants so far, direct lines from the miners who died in the collapse." The study was transformed. Papers covered every surface, genealogical charts taped to walls, maps marked with red pins. "What will you do when you've found them all?" Eleanor asked. "Give them everything," Martin said simply. "The Crowley Foundation assets, the remaining property, all of it, and tell them the truth about how their ancestors died." Eleanor gestured to the papers. "May I?" Martin nodded, and Eleanor began examining his research. The work was meticulous. Birth certificates, death records, marriage licenses, census data, all carefully organized to trace family lines from 1902 to the present. "This is impressive," she acknowledged, "but I'm not sure it will be enough." "What do you mean?" Eleanor told him about the university archives, the spreading phenomenon of children appearing in historical photographs, Lisa's dreams, and the message left on her computer. Martin sank into his chair. "It's not just my family they want justice from. It's all of them, all the mine owners who cut corners, falsified inspections, sacrificed lives for profit." "Exactly," Eleanor agreed. "Your great-grandfather wasn't the only one. The entire industry was built on exploitation and negligence. The children are using us, using anyone connected to those photographs to expose all of it." A soft sound from upstairs interrupted their conversation, the creak of floorboards, as if someone was walking slowly across the ceiling above them. "They're here," Martin whispered. "They've been coming and going all day, more of them each time." As if in confirmation, childish laughter echoed from somewhere in the house, followed by the sound of running footsteps. "We should go upstairs," Eleanor said, surprised by her own steady voice. "They want us to see something." Martin nodded grimly. "The children's bedroom. That's where they gather." They climbed the stairs together, the old wood groaning beneath their feet. The door to the children's bedroom stood open, warm light spilling into the hallway, despite the fact that no lamps had been left on. Inside, the room had transformed. The walls were covered with photographs, hundreds of them, appearing to be pasted directly to the wallpaper, though Eleanor could see no adhesive. Mining operations, school groups, family portraits, church gatherings, all from the same period, all now showing children with unnaturally bright eyes. And seated on the bed, arranged in a neat semicircle, were 9 silver daguerreotype frames, no longer empty. Each one now contained the image of a child, staring out with solemn intensity. "They've come back to their frames," Martin whispered. "Not exactly," Eleanor said, approaching carefully. "Look closer." The images in the frames were not the formal portraits that had originally occupied them. Instead, each showed a child standing at the entrance to a mine shaft. Different mines, judging by the surroundings, but all with the same foreboding darkness yawning behind the small figures. "What are they showing us?" Martin wondered. As if in answer, one of the daguerreotypes changed before their eyes. The image shifted, the child moving deeper into the mine shaft, looking back as if beckoning the viewers to follow. Another frame changed, then another, each showing children entering mines, disappearing into the darkness. They want us to follow them, Eleanor realized. Into the mines. But the mines are all closed, Martin objected. Sealed decades ago after the coal ran out. The largest daguerreotype, the one that had contained Thomas Crowley's portrait, changed last. It now showed a small figure standing at the entrance to a mine, partially hidden by overgrowth. Above the entrance, barely visible through decades of weather damage, was a sign, Crowley, Coal and Iron, Shaft, Sir 7. That's on my property, Martin said softly. The first shaft my great-grandfather opened, it was sealed after the 1902 collapse, deemed too unstable to continue operations. A child's voice spoke directly behind them. Not sealed well enough. Eleanor and Martin whirled around. A boy of about 10 stood in the doorway, solid, not spectral, though his old-fashioned clothing and solemn expression marked him as one of the children from the photographs. "You can see me now," the boy said. "Both of you. That means you're ready." "Ready for what?" Eleanor asked. "To see the truth," the boy replied. "All of it, at shaft No. 7, tonight." He turned his gaze to Martin. "Bring a lantern, and something to dig with." Before either adult could respond, the boy faded from view, leaving only a cold spot in the air where he had stood. Martin looked at Eleanor, his face pale but resolute. "We have to go, don't we?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "Yes, but first I need to call David. Let him know what's happening." She pulled out her phone. No signal. Not surprising in these remote hills. She'd have to use Martin's landline, but as they turned to leave the room, the door slammed shut. On the back of it, words appeared as if being written by an invisible hand. "No one else. Only the bloodline and the witness. Tonight, shaft the 7. Martin touched the words, his fingers coming away dry. "The bloodline," he murmured. "That's me. The last Crowley. And I'm the witness," Eleanor realized. "The historian, the one who documents." The implications settled over them like the dust in the abandoned room. "If we do this," Eleanor said quietly, "we need to be prepared for what we might find." Martin nodded grimly. "I have lanterns in the cellar, shovels too, and—" He hesitated. "My great-grandfather's journals. The complete set. I found them hidden in a wall safe behind his portrait. I've only skimmed them, but they contain details about decisions made, corners cut, lives valued in dollars and cents."